And it also makes it really easy for you to remember my name. So, work developer, we started that about 10 years ago. And the title of the meeting, the presentation was Architectural Journey from 1.0 to 2.0, or from 1.0 to 2.0 to 2.1 to 3.0, because we just keep moving on the architecture. So Developer is an alliance partner. Luis and I are based in Austin, Texas, and Chris Robert, who's in the very discreet red jacket, is in the UK. And we mainly work with large teams of Latin developers that have realized midway that they're actually doing software engineering, but none of them are software engineers. So they start realizing there are certain tools that they need to know how to use, like source code control, unit testing, DI analyzer, know what a requirement is, when are you done, all those type of things that I hope that for most of the people in this room are everyday stuff. But these teams don't have it, and they might not have an architect in-house, so we help them set that up. So is this presentation for you? And this is one of those what you do if we were divided into rooms, right? So I would get people to run to the other room screaming because this is not for them. So let's see if I got it right. Do you work by yourself, but you know, wish, hope that one day a team will work for you? Anyone in that situation? Nobody works by themselves here? Okay. All right. I was like, oh, I know that happens to somebody in the room. Do you work with a team and wish you had an architecture shared by all members of your team with templates and reusable code? Okay, so right now, the few that raise your hands, you basically have Peter does his own architecture, John does his own architecture. Is that the case? Yes? You have reusable code?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. But it's just not that people don't know where to find it? Is that the, yeah? Okay. Do you work with a team and you're looking for ways to continue to improve your current architecture? All right, yeah. Good. That's a lot more people. Do you have an architecture or template published via the Tools Network? All right, back there? Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm missing like 2/3 of the room, so I need to know what is the part that I'm missing here, because I was hoping a lot more people raising their hands. Or are you already taking a siesta because we just had lunch? Okay. Yeah. Well, the other thing too, since I didn't cover all of you, remember that you are programming for a psychopath that knows where you live. That's the mindset that you should have. And that psychopath can be yourself. Because 3 months from now, 4 months from now, you're going to be a different programmer than what you are today. So what seemed clever at 3 in the morning on July 14 of 2014 might not make any sense now. And then when you find out, you say, oh, that was clever, and then you don't document it, that's bad. You're going to have the same deja vu in a year after that. So just remember that you're programming for a psychopath that knows where you live. So we do have, and then the reason I did that slide too is I'm going to be using the DQMH as my example for the slides. That's because we created the DQMH as a project template and set of toolkits, a set of tools, scripting tools that help developers create architectures that have multiple modules running in parallel. So once you install the DQMH, on the Get Me Started window, you click on Create a Project, it adds an item that's developer QMH. Sorry, the little lobby guy is not included. So you only get the DQMH entry. So why did we publish DQMH? So how many people here is their first CLA summit? Wow, is that about half of the room? Okay, so you weren't here last year. For the rest, I'm sorry. This is a repeat of the slide that I showed last year. So why did we create a CLA DQMH? Well, because that's what CLAs do, right? So we created our own architecture because we wanted to show that we were architects and we can create our own architecture. We also wanted to have something that was accessible to NI support. We're a small team. When we go and work with a team of developers, we cannot afford for them to be calling us every time that they have a little problem, right? We want them to call us when they have an architecture issue or when they need a code review or an architectural discussion. So if we made an architecture that was accessible to NI support, that means they can call NI support when they have lobby questions and call us when they have architecture questions. We wanted to make it accessible to CLDs. This is one request from our customers. They cannot afford to have to hire a CLA every time that they're looking for a lobby developer. It's better for them if they have a CLAD or a CLD and they can support and maintain the code, and then, you know, it's easier. It's a lot more people out there. We also wanted something that would work with testnet. We wanted it to use object-oriented programming, but we didn't want it to be a requirement to understand object-oriented programming. Again, we work with teams that have different levels of proficiency. So there might be a lot of people in the team that are not comfortable with object-oriented programming yet. And yet you want to make sure that the people that are comfortable with object-oriented programming can use it. So we did an architecture that provides an abstraction that's accessible to the CLD, but it still provides a way to add OOP on the back for the advanced user. We wanted to support multiple instances, and we wanted to add scripting tools. One of the things that we had experienced with the user event architecture that we created, both Chris and I, before we started working together, had worked with different versions of public and private user events. And the main complaint we had from others taking over our architectures or from customers was that creating a user event is a pain. There's a lot of steps involved, and we would end up having them call us to, so how is it that you create a user event again? And then show them all the steps. And every time we had to do that, we always said, I wish it was scripted. So we created the scripting tools that create the user events and other stuff. I also wanted to share with you, this was launched a year ago. It's on the Tools Network. It's a free framework. The VIs are not password protected, so you can go and check it out. And there are some completed applications that use the DQMH. There's an automated test system for cryogenic catheters. That one has 6 DQMH modules, and it was for a customer in Montreal, Canada. We didn't do that one. Several of these applications are actually other developers have shared with us that that's the successful application they worked on. User interface for a femto level amplifier evaluation board. That one only had 1 DQMH module. A neurofeedback application with 12 DQMH modules. It works with hardware. Has different modules running in parallel, controls third-party software, has to communicate with the third-party software. It's in Canada. Control software for new patented pump technology for oil and gas, 10 DQMH modules. Projects and task management software for transportation company, 12 DQMH modules, and a PCB test system. So you can see it's more medium applications. We don't have like 5100 DQMH modules, at least not yet. But it's more medium-sized applications that people have used DQMH with. So what is it that I wanted to talk about is that as architectures evolve, the things that you need to pay attention to are the use cases, the documentation, your developer experience, the team that's actually going to have to use the code that you're providing. You didn't know this, but you actually have to think about them. You need to know which are the debugging tools that you're going to provide, what are the productivity tools, like do I have to provide any scripting in specific, and then make best practices intuitive. You also have to have some way of tracking any issues that come up with the architecture. So imagine an architect decides to create plans for sheds. This is very typical in the US. They have a shed where you put all your tools, you have space for the lawnmower, etc. And the book is published with all the plans for sheds. This is an architecture presentation, right? That's why I picked an architecture. So, after publishing, this is what others are doing with the original plans. Any ideas? What would you do with a shed? No? You would build a tiny house complete with a bathroom, kitchen, and everything. Do you think that the guy that came up with the plans for the shed was thinking about supporting the furniture and having a hole for the sewage and having a battery and all that stuff? Probably not. Okay? And they probably are not going to go back and modify their plans because you decided to make a house with the shed that they have provided. So, that analogy is because our main use case continues to be implementing multiple tasks running in parallel at different rates that need to communicate between them. The developers that have contacted us with crazy ideas that they want to use DQMH with, or that have used DQMH, are applications that have a single module, but the fact that we provide a tester for the API means that they can automate testing the user interface of their application. So we had people that only had one DQMH module. We never thought about that use case. Wrap DQMH modules in .NET, so they could use it to communicate with other software without having to go to the deal of sharing the classes and all the challenges that come with that, and then keep the classes wrapped by the DQMH. Again, that had never crossed our minds. Requests to implement inter-target communication. We had thought about it, but it wasn't something that we had in the format when we created the architecture. So what are my tips for that? Be prepared for others using the architecture in ways you did not expect or imagine, and adjust accordingly where possible. Wait a second, now you're asking me, Fabiola, that I have to think about the crazy guy that's going to be put in the kitchen sink in my architecture. Well, that's why I said where possible. Because the really highlight, the thing that you have to always keep in mind is who was your original audience. So the guy that built the shed, the original audience was not creating a kitchen, right? So he doesn't have the obligation to change it so it fits what the guy that wants to put the kitchen in. So for ours, the original audience was mixed proficiency developers with several not comfortable yet with OOP. So changing the DQMH completely to be OOP based would be great for a lot of the people in this room, but it was out of the question for us. However, fixing a bug in the few classes that we had, that's very important, and we're actually going to be talking about an issue that we address on 2.1. All right, so that's use cases. The other thing I told you to keep in mind was documentation. So in our case, the pros is we're getting lots of great feedback about documentation and our videos, and I have to come clean there. On the Tools Network, we have 3 ratings with 5 stars, except one of those ratings is the same person. So we have actually 2 people doing the survey, but we have 3. The cons, a lot of people came with the feedback that the test stand section on our documentation was confusing. There's Lavi developers that don't even know what test stand is. So there was a section on test stand where we're talking about a sequence and locals in test stand. So this guy was like, how can you be coming here and tell me that your architecture is great when you're using sequences and locals? Or sequence locals. And I was like, I think you're in the test stand section, that's not in the lobby section. We also realized that there was no way to update minor changes in the documentation. So for 2.1, what we did is we added links to allow people to skip the test stand section. It's an easy thing. And we published the documentation online. So that way, if somebody finds misspelling or a little thing like this that could be addressed, I don't have to build a new package just for them to see the update of the documentation. So the tips. And again, this goes from the person that's working by themselves to a team. The documentation might seem really clear to you and to your team. It actually takes an outsider or someone new to your team to really make your documentation better. It might be obvious to you, right? To me, the fact that the file had an extension .seq meant that you were in the test stand section, right? For a newcomer that has never used test stand, they just thought it was part of the title for whatever reason. So you need to provide more information. The way we tested our documentation was getting CLEDs that had never used events as a transport mechanism, that had never had 2 VIs communicating between each other to read our documentation. And that's before we release it. So you guys that work with a team, you can go to the person, you get the senior architect to write the documentation, and then you get the lowest person in the team to review that it's actually clear and makes sense, right? And then if you can get an outsider, it's even better. We start with clear documentation and as much information as possible. This encourages others to give feedback to improve. There's a study they made where if you break a window in a house and you don't fix it, if you come back in a couple of months, it doesn't matter if it's a nice neighborhood. be more windows broken. Because people feel like, oh, nobody's taking care of that, and I really had a bad day, so nobody's going to find out that it was me, and then they break the other window. The same applies when people take care of their houses. The neighbors will start doing the same thing. So the same thing applies to your code. If you apply attention to your code, if you're taking care of improving the code, and that shows, others in your team are going to be more encouraged to give feedback, especially also if you act on it. So also, provide types of documentation for different learners. So as we start to age and we get more millennials working with us, they are not used to reading pages and pages of a PDF, right? A video, short video showing what they're supposed to do. Good. I'm sure there's other things that I don't know about that they're starting to use. So that's also something to keep in mind. So that's one of the reasons why we provide videos. All right, developer experience. So this is, you want your developers to be like, great, today I get to work on Joe's code. And not be like, oh my God, today I have to use this guy's API, I already know that it's a pain to debug, right? You don't want that. You want them to actually enjoy using your code. So one of the things that you need to think about is the debugging tools. So when we launched the first version of the DQMH, we added a way for the public API to call opening the block diagram. So we have a tester, you can press while the API is executing, press a button to show the block diagram. That's especially useful when you have multiple VIs, clone VIs. Has anybody tried debugging clone VIs? Right? Okay, how do you debug them? You put a breakpoint before you hit run, right? And then how do you know you're debugging the one that you wanted to debug? Because you might have 10 clones, and I wanted to do number 5. So what we did is we made it easy to just say, I want to communicate with clone number 5, and then open the block diagram for that. And that seemed like, that's enough, that should be fine. Well, for 2.0, we had to put that inside a runtime engine and conditional disable. For us, it was obvious that it's a scripting property, and it doesn't work in an executable. Plus, an executable has a runtime engine, you cannot see block diagrams, right? We still have people asking, hey, it doesn't work on the executable. So this way, I'm documenting with code that we know that it doesn't work in an executable. Also, if you use VI Analyzer, there's a specific test that shows you VIs that do not work in an executable. So you would get dinged by this, and it would say, hey, this doesn't work in an executable. But as we open the code, you can see, oh, they knew that it doesn't work in an executable. One more thing we did was adding a module name to the error reported argument. Again, one of those things that's a small thing, but it makes a difference when you have 12, 15, 20 DQMH modules running in parallel. You want to know who sent the error. So we just added that VI there that has the module name. That way, when you're debugging, you have a writer handy and you can know where the error came from. In 2.1, we also added an error add local variable. So, who would know? Who would have thought that just adding that on the template made a lot of developers happy? Because if they had an error, they would get the feedback right away, instead of having to wait to get the message back that there was an error. So little things, yeah, some of the beginners are like, well, you're using locals. Somebody told me I was not supposed to use local variables. Well, in this case, it's actually good use of it, and it's going to make the life of the developers easier. So some of the tips on here. How much a developer loves, wants to use your architecture will be directly proportional on how easy it is to debug. You spend a lot more time debugging code than you do writing it. And it doesn't matter how cool the scripting tools are that we created, and it doesn't matter how cool and fun it is to create a new code, if I'm making it hard for you to debug and troubleshoot, then you're not going to use it. Or you're going to be working on somebody else's code, and you're going to be like, oh, why did they use this? I know that it's a pain. I know I have to go put breakpoints on all my clones because I know that I need to troubleshoot and I don't have an easy way to do it. follow your bug reporting medium, any device that you have to report issues, make sure that you keep on top of it. In our case, we have published the DQMH on the Tools Network, so we have a group at ni.com/groups. You look for developer, and you find our forum, and we're following up the reports there for issues that people encounter when they're using DQMH. So by the way, how many here have seen the DQMH? Okay, anybody else? Anybody using it? I guess you're not my target audience. So, internally, if you are in a team, you're probably not going to be using ni.com to report issues, but you might be using things like Jira, Fogbox, Foxila, right? Excel spreadsheet or Joe's computer, something that you keep track of what's happening on your code. Some of the other things that we did for enhancement of developer experience was producing productivity tools, so scripting, adding a way to create new DQMH module, create new DQMH event, remove event, validate code, and in 2.0 we added renaming a DQMH module, and then an option to customize the module names when you create a project. And now for 2.1, we're going to provide the scripting tool that takes your 2.0 to 2.1, all the improvements that we're seeing to do it automatically. So my tips for scripting. Identify repetitive tasks in the everyday use of the architecture and provide scripting tools, templates, or project templates. Now I love this comment here, but I don't need templates. I can code a producer-consumer from scratch in 5 minutes. So I was teaching an advanced architectures and Navi course, and somebody said that. And I said, okay, go. And I timed them. I'm going to show you in a minute what they did. But first, listen to feedback to improving architecture over improving tools. Sometimes, because we like to code and because we like doing scripting tools, somebody comes with a problem and you immediately go to, let me create a tool for that. Let's look at why the tool is needed. Was there some way to simplify the architecture itself so the tool is not needed? So always do that and keep your intended audience in mind. So this is what the guy did in 5 minutes. So who wants to tell me what the problem is? Come on, tell me. Okay, probably because it's on a big screen, somebody actually said that DQ is outside the loop. I tried to test this presentation with several people, and very respected advanced developers in the community did not see that because they were too busy looking at how they're not stopping the loops. The type of stuff that you always end doing and adding to a producer consumer, right? Oh, there's no error. They're not stopping the loops. There's no, and then nobody was looking at the queuing, which was a really great way to prove my point. When you don't use templates, and it's something that you do over and over and over, you're going to assume that the code that you do over and over and over is right. Right? On a producer-consumer, you're not going to be looking at the DQ because you know that there's 2 loops, the DQ goes inside the case structure. So yes, you can produce it in 5 minutes, but it's going to take you 15, 20, 30 minutes to troubleshoot. So if you're finding that there's in your architecture, you end up doing the same type of BI, even if it's a stop BI with the error in, error out, an area for inputs and error out, create a template for that. Why start with a blank BI every time? And it is especially important for the younger people on your team, the CLDs, the CLAs. If you want to avoid spending time troubleshooting code that should just work, then do that. So don't be that guy. All right. Make best practices intuitive. So this one, James Powell, when we presented this a year ago, and in the forum as well, he pointed out that we had an issue here. And the issue is, we are telling the world that the initialize case is done initializing way behind that. So we're telling the world that we're ready to receive messages a lot earlier than when we get to this code. So you can make this code end up in a situation where somebody ends up inserting something before we initialize data, and that message gets skipped. So our answer was, well, the best practice is don't send an event until the init broadcast was received. That was our answer. That's, you're just not doing best practices. Well, the DQMH that Chip Suite and I, with LabVIEW, actually has fixed that on 2015. And we went and looked back at our code, and we thought we didn't have the issue, but we had it. We just had been lucky it had not created a bug. So what we did is, in 2.0, we moved the BI that tells the rest of the world we're ready to receive information inside the case itself. This ensures that nobody's going to be inserting anything before we initialize, we're ready to receive messages. And by that time, I already addressed everything. We also put everything, all the initialize, instead of being 3 cases, it's a single case now. Okay? So, make best practices intuitive. One thing to keep in mind is if solving a possible race condition can only be done via following best practices, you need to look at your architecture. Because it's a lot easier. It goes back to what I was saying earlier this morning. You're dealing with humans, and we're going to make mistakes. And if you make it where they have to keep in mind, besides everything they know, that the best practice is not to do X, you're not making their job easy or as enjoyable as it should be. Keep your audience in mind. If the ultimate solution is not accessible to your audience, then you can consider providing tools that will help you identify those issues. So some of these tools could be a custom test for the analyzer. And again, developers don't run the analyzer test, so continuous integration is really good for that because you run it for them. Or you have someone that's running the analyzer to test, and then they start learning from that. Or provide another scripting tool to do it. Issue tracking. So another thing with DQMH 1.0, 2.0, we don't provide a way to DQ, to time out the DQ. The reason for that is we believe that we want to make sure that the modules can go to sleep. And they're only processing when they need to process a request, either because a request came from the front panel or the request came from the outside world. So by not having the timeout here or not having the timeout in the event structure, we're ensuring that they wake up when an event happens. Well, that's great, but on 1.0 and 2.0, we made the accessors to the queue private. So, oops, sorry. Until somebody tried to do that, and they were like, well, your code on the documentation says that if I want to do that, it's in blue down there, just create an override for this VI. Well, I can create the override, but I cannot access the queue. So what use is that? So again, sorry about that. So what we did is in 2.1, we made the cluster that has the elements inside the queue protected, and the accessors for the queue protected. So you can create an override for how we're doing that. We still think you shouldn't do it, but if you must, you can create a child. All right, restarting a singleton module. So this one was interesting. We had tested in all of our test plans, we would test that I could start a module, stop it, and then press the start button and start it again. But we never tested restarting a module until somebody tried to restart a module, and they started having errors. And we were like, what's going on? So just to guide you through the process, our stop BI on the public API with DQMH uses a rendezvous to know when the BI, the main module, gets to the end of the code. But that just means that the BI that I'm communicating with got to the end of the code. That doesn't mean that it got completely outside of the BI. Does that make sense? Yes? So, the start module for us, the start BI, what it does is checks the execution state of the BI. So what happens when you have the restart option is you get to the rendezvous that says that you're at the end of the code. So your stop goes out and then goes to the start, gets to the start here, and the execution state says that your BI is still running. Because it was so fast that it never finished running. By the way, we use the run BI because if you use the start asynchronous call, apparently when you configure it to call and forget, it also forgets its execution state. And you cannot use the execution state to know what the VI is doing. So that's one of the reasons why they run VI. So for 2.1, what we're doing is we're wrapping the execution state into a sub-VI, and then using that in the start module and in the stop module. It makes sense that if I'm using that to know if I need to relaunch the VI or not, I should also use that to know if the VI stopped. So we are doing now, and of course now the stop is a lot more complicated than it used to be. The first thing is we check if it's still running, because if it's no longer, there's no need to go inside the whole code. And then we added wait for main VI to stop running. And another detail we added is we added extra information on the error itself that says, you know, stopping your module timed out, by the way, the module might still be running. So that way the developer knows that what's happening there. So my tips for issue tracking is new use cases are going to uncover new issues. So provide a way for the developer to report those issues. There's no way you can think about every single use case. We thought that providing the option of starting the module and stopping the module was enough to test the API. We did not provide a restart, right? If we had done that, we would have figured out this before release. Use an issue tracking system to track how you're addressing those issues. Publish the issue resolution and include it on the release notes. And in our case, we use Jira. Some of our customers use Fogbugs, Boxilla. What other tools are you guys using for issue tracking? Which one? Redmine. Any other tools? What was that?
I use one called
Done. That one I have never heard. Okay. Any other? Zendesk. Wow. I need to go look at more. Okay. What was that? Notepad. Yeah, like an Excel spreadsheet too. You could use that one, yeah. So the evolution continues. I don't think we will ever be done with this, for me it's fine. I love working on it and finding new ways to improve it. So one of the things is we're going to be doing for 3.0 is we're going to request and wait for reply creation of that type of communication. Right now doesn't include the error reported by processing the request. So this goes back to the best practices. We tell everybody on our team the best practice is to include the error as part of the argument. Until somebody said, well, if that's the best practice, why isn't it part of the scripting tool that creates the event to begin with? And we're like, yeah, good point. So 3.0 is going to have that. An option to rename the DQMH event. Again, the practice right now is you delete the one you have via the scripting tool, then create a new one, and then move all your code. So that's not enjoyable, and we need to provide a way to do it. So just to summarize, when you're working on your architectures, it doesn't matter if you're working in a team, you're working by yourself, if you're producing code that you're selling to others to use, or you're providing code for free in the library to members like we do. Things that you have to keep in mind is coming back and checking what are the use cases, how people are using your code. Is your documentation clear enough? Are there things that you can provide better? What are the developer experience enhancements? Focus on debugging tools. You need to make sure that your code is easy to debug or troubleshoot. Otherwise, people are not going to use it. Provide the scripting tools or templates, because starting from scratch will just introduce bugs. We're humans. We're going to skip some steps. Make best practices intuitive. Make them part of the code. Don't have a set of rules out there that people need to memorize. And have some way of having issue tracking that will keep making improvements to the framework itself. And let's avoid this. So the guy comes out and says, the life of a software engineer, clean slate, solid foundations. This time I will build things the right way. And then he goes, oh my, I've done it again, haven't I? So anyway, that's it. Any questions? No? Wow. Oh, wait, Nancy first.
I was curious about, with regards to when I download DQMH, how many of your customers are begin with just editing that and
both the project from the getting a started window. You can go to a project, and that gives you a project that has two modules, a top level application and an executable builder specification already there. And then you can edit that. However, we realized that a lot of people wanted to add DQMH modules, including ourselves, to existing projects. So in that case, you go to Tools, Delacore, add new DQMH module, and you can add it to your existing project. One of the things that we also show in the project is the top level application is not a DQMH, it's just a simple state machine. Because we wanted to make sure people knew you don't need to make the entire code be DQMH. You can just start integrating it in small pieces. Does that answer your question?
Well, actually, I was thinking also along the lines of, if I'm a customer, I may have certain initialization steps that I'm doing over and over and over again. So I really want to customize my DQMH templates and then provide it for me.
So we provide that as a service. I mean, again, the project template is not password protected, so you could definitely go and copy that and customize it to your needs. But one of the things that we do is, this is the architecture that works for us. This doesn't mean that it's the architecture that's going to work for our customers. So we have some customers, for example, that they want something that's more class-oriented, object-oriented programming. And we create the scripting tools for them, for the templates that they're already using. So I know a lot of people here, you can learn scripting and do really cool stuff with scripting, but some of you are more worried about working on billable work and getting things out the door than learning a new tool. So you can hire us for that. Back there?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, it's a question or just a concept. You raised very important question about templates.
Mm-hmm.
But more specific template, less often we use them.
Yes.
And I got very often such a situation. Yes, I need template, I did it 5 years ago. I start to dig in my backups, and after an hour of digging, I found it is not what I memorized. It cannot be used. And the same in company, we have a lot of templates, but made by different developers.
Yes.
And very often digging inside templates is really a waste of time. So maybe somebody has a good idea about systematic approach to keep it template.
So the template that I'm talking about, and the question was like, or the comment was that, sometimes you know that you did this code before, but just spending the time on trying to dig out where it is, and then you finally find it after an hour, and it turns out that it was not exactly what you were looking for. So does anybody have a system to do that? What we work with teams when we're doing consulting initiative is trying to figure out a central location where these libraries need to be at. Also, we suggest that you have an owner for each section of the library. One of the problems that occurs with reusable code when companies try to use reusable code is that they say, well, but I found this bug or I found this issue and I don't have access to fix it. So by having an owner, you can have somebody else to come back and provide the feedback. This template was almost what I needed, but it needs this adjustment. So what we do is we use bookmarks. Have you used bookmarks on projects on Navi? If you put a hashtag, starting on 2014, I think, and then you can do a search on the bookmark viewer. So while you're going through to a project, what we suggest is that you start identifying what is a reusable code. You provide an owner for that. You create that as a separate product, and you put it in the reusable code, and you create a project on your bug tracking system so anybody can provide feedback to that. If the team is part of creating that reusable code, they're probably going to be more inclined to use it. And on the point of the templates, you don't want to templatize everything, but you want to templatize the things that you'll be doing for each project. So we have a template, for example, for top-level BI that has the version of the executable shown automatically, that has an about, that has information of the company, that has all these little things that we end up doing for every single project we do. So it doesn't make sense to start that every time, because one of the junior developers is going to forget to put the version. And those are the little things that make this a professional application. So those are the type of stuff that should be a template. Design patterns should be a template. Now the design patterns that ship with Lavio, the producer consumer, it suffers from the opposite of what you're saying. It's too generic. right? It doesn't have a good way to stop. It doesn't have error handling. It uses a bunch of naked VIs. There's a lot of stuff there that could be improved. But the QMH or the DQMH might be too specific. So you might need for your organization something in between. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Any other suggestions? Does anybody else have a good way they do manage reusable code, or how you address knowing what you do the templates for? No? Oh, you guys know, none of you use reusable code.
But Fabiola, everyone uses source code control, so we're okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't go on a killing rampage this morning. So really, nobody uses library?
It's only that none of us has a good solution.
What was that?
It's only that none of us has a good solution.
No, but none of us have good solutions. I guess the topic for the next CLA summit is how to manage reusable code.
Yeah.
There was
Doesn't work. How much time does supporting the QMH takes from your time pipeline?
So how much time does supporting DQMH takes from our time? I've been surprised, and I've been happy to hear some of you. When I asked how many people were using it, no many hands were raised. But at least yesterday, 2 people, and today at lunch approached me saying that they know people that are using it. They know CLDs that are using the DQMH. We don't get a lot of the feedback of the things that are working right, besides the nice reviews. We get the feedback of the people that have issues. And I have been surprised, it's been very low. We probably, and we keep track of time, so I could go and tell you exactly, but it probably is down to maybe 5 hours a month that we end up spending on the forums. So to me that says that it's pretty solid or nobody's using it. One of the two. So I'm going to go for it's solid enough that people are finding their way through. Now let's talk next year, right? Maybe next year I'm like, oh my god, we're spending too much time supporting it. Any other questions? Comments? Well, it seems like we already have a topic for dinner then. We're going to be discussing how to manage reusable code. Or hire a developer and we can help you figure it out.